Guys, well, welcome back. This is part two of our impacts and abatement talk. I'm gonna have to figure out how to drag. Okay, we're good to go there. Sorry, let me get my bearings here. Yeah, so part two of impacts and abatement. My name is Josh Helsel. I am project coordinator with the Texas A&M Natural Resources Institute. Just a quick recap of what we discussed yesterday. We got into some new economic impact data. We also went over just some general impacts. We know wild pigs are wreaking havoc on the landscape in a variety of ways. Translated that a little bit more into control techniques and broke them down between our non-lethal control techniques and then our lethal control techniques. And we did address the non-lethal control techniques yesterday. And now we're going to get into the lethal control options for wild pigs in the state of Texas. And so what we're looking at right here is currently our legal options for wild pigs in Texas. And you guys can see that we have trapping, snaring, shooting, aerial gunning, and the use of trained dogs. A couple of things that I want to point out just real quick is one, we do not have a toxicant labeled for use here in Texas or the United States. By all accounts, by this time this year, it was indicated to me that sodium nitrite would even possibly be labeled by August of 2020. And, you know, COVID put the brakes on a lot of things, and certainly toxicants in the wild pig world, it seems to have done the same. So I do have a few things to talk about toxicants later today, but just to be honest with you guys, I have very little new information and I'm really not sure what's been going on, especially since the start of the COVID thing. So we don't see toxicants labeled for use there as a legal option. The second thing that we don't see is in our legal options is tannerite. Tannerite is, in case anybody needed to know, is not a legal option here in the state of Texas. Believe it or not, I get a ton of questions about that. And technically, you know, after what we're going to learn today, you know, even if it were, it wouldn't be the best option, because what I'm going to suggest to you guys today is looking at these options. You know, we have trapping, snaring, shooting, aerial gunning, and the use of trained dogs. I'd like to suggest that we think about these lethal tools in terms of tools of population reduction and tools of pressure. And so of the five that we see here, there are two methods that are research proven to be independently capable of reducing populations. And those two are trapping and aerial gunning. Research has been out on this for quite a while, and snaring, shooting, and trained dogs. Now, these are generally tools that are more aptly directed as tools of pressure, tools to direct animal movements, and tools that can be used to reduce damages. We talked yesterday about sometimes the name of the game is not always population reduction. Sometimes, you know, depending on your situation, it may not be feasible to have aerial gunning. It may not be feasible to have trapping. In these cases, we can look towards our tools of pressure to direct animal movements. And I'll expound on that as we proceed through this, but just keep that in the back of your mind as we proceed. And with that, we'll go ahead and jump into it. Okay, also, I forgot about this one. I wanted to provide a laws and regulations update for wild pigs in the state of Texas. And in this particular case, the update is that there is no update. Nothing has changed since September 1, 2019. And the big thing that did change then was that no hunting license was required from that point on to hunt and pursue wild pigs in the state of Texas on private property, as long as you had landowner authorization and permission. This is a pretty unique deal. I think we're one of the only states in the United States that's doing something like this. The hunter education requirements still do apply. You do have to have hunter education if you are required to do so. But since September 1, 2019, residents and non-residents, nobody has needed a hunting license any longer to pursue wild pigs. This is pretty unique, because what that means is that, you know, folks from California, folks from from New York, folks from anywhere in the United States can now come to Texas and no longer have to pay some of the highest non-resident hunting fees in the United States today. I mean, and as I understand it too, this applies to international hunters as well. So if you're coming from Canada, anywhere, you do not need a license in the state of Texas any longer, provided that you're following all the other laws, like no trespassing, shooting across roadways, adhering to city limit guidelines and things like that. The only exception being is that if you're participating in the Texas public hunting program, meaning if you're doing the state park hunts, if you're doing the WMA hunts, no matter what you're after there, you do have to have a hunting license. But aside from that, Texas makes it very easy to recreationally pursue wild pigs through hunting and recreational efforts. And it is, let's make no mistake, a species that we can pursue 24/7, 7 days a week, day and night, no bag limit, no season. That is an attractive thing in the state of Texas. That's an attractive thing for a lot of wildlife managers and wildlife operations. And the fact that nobody needs a hunting license anymore makes it that much easier for folks to get in there and get after wild pigs. But we're going to talk about shooting first, right? I mean, you asked 9 out of 10 Texans, what's the best way to go after wild pigs? And they're going to say, well, shooting, in my 30-06. And a lot of folks are surprised to learn that generally shooting and hunting of any kind is a low harvest method. It is generally proven to not be independently capable of reducing populations. However, this is one of our most effective techniques that we have for directing animal movement and reducing damages. I do want to say too, when we talk about the research, when we talk about the different control techniques, and I say, oh, research says this and research says that, I want to point out that there's always exceptions. For example, I know some guys in South Texas, some ex-military guys that get out there on these big fields at night with suppressors, night vision, thermal. They're in groups of 8 to 10 or more. These guys are military trained. And they're pulling 40, 50, 60, 80, sometimes 100 hogs a night. And it's hard for me, even though I do look into all this research and am reinforced by that, it's hard for me to believe that those folks aren't in fact reducing population. So take a little bit of that with a grain of salt, when we talk about the generalities of research. In this particular case, what we're referring to here is the average thing that occurs across Texas, which is, there's a farmer or rancher driving through the fields and he sees 20 pigs out there and he pulls out the Winchester and he shoots one of them and maybe he even gets that one of them. But those 19 pigs that just ran off are now much more aware of human presence and human danger. And in some cases, that can be a really good thing as far as directing animal movements. But in other cases, particularly when you're trying to enact population reduction efforts, in many cases that can do more harm than good. But we talked about shooting as a very powerful tool of pressure, and the research does affirm that. As a matter of fact, this is probably our most powerful tool that we have to reduce agricultural damages. This particular study found that agricultural damage in areas open to hunting was less than half than in unhunted areas, meaning that just through strategic shooting and hunting alone, you can potentially significantly reduce your agricultural damages and direct animal movements and cause those animals to abandon areas where they're causing damage. The catch here is this: pigs are usually they're considered a diurnal and nocturnal species, right? And so they will run around in the daytime, particularly when we have cooler weather, wetter weather. But if you start shooting at pigs in the daytime, one of the things that happens almost immediately is they won't abandon that area. They'll just come back at 2 in the morning. maybe 10:30 at night, 11 o'clock at night, and continue to wreak havoc and cause damage. So in order for this technique to be effective at reducing damages, particularly to the scale that we're speaking of here, to this research, we need to be prepared to enact both daytime and nighttime strategic shooting efforts. Because you start putting pressure on them in the day, they're certainly going to go nocturnal, but you start putting that nighttime pressure on them, that daytime pressure on them, you keep that up. Of course, you're going to reduce some numbers, but generally what's going to happen is those pigs will abandon that area, and you can save a lot of crops that way, and you can save a lot of ag damage that way. And this is probably the way that I would suggest how we think about shooting as a tool in wild pig management, because certainly there are folks out there doing a lot of good and reducing populations, but those are pretty rare circumstances, and for the rest of us, we can look at this as a tool to reduce damage. I had mentioned that Texas makes it pretty easy to pursue wild pigs recreationally. And, technically everything that you are seeing here is currently legal in the state of Texas, right? You can go after wild pigs from UTVs, even from vehicles, as long as you are on a private roadway, meaning on your ranch road and no public roadway. Artificial lighting is certainly allowed. Unplugged shotguns, just about as big of a clip for whatever firearm you want, is 100% usable. One note that I will make to this is that if you are going to be spotlighting hogs, if you are going to be using artificial lighting, if you are going to be going after them at night, a lot of Texas game wardens really do appreciate a courtesy call, meaning, call your game warden up, let them know, hey, we're going to be doing some spotlight, and we're going to be doing some artificial lighting stuff. We're going to be applying pressure to our ag fields at night. Just give them that heads up so that they don't think that you're out there poaching deer, which actually is a significant problem in Texas. Particularly during deer season, when a lot of folks will say that they're hog hunting and that kind of thing. But after what we just learned about strategic shooting as a tool in general, this may not be the best option, particularly if we're looking to reduce populations. Now, we said that trapping and aerial gunning are the two tools that are independently capable of reducing populations. And for most of us, those are the tools that we want to look at, and we want to look at first. I took a look back at successful eradication studies over the last 80 years or so. And unequivocally, in almost every circumstance, the successful eradication efforts involved intensive implementation of population reduction strategies first, meaning that the first thing that you want to look at, particularly in times of low resource availability, is things like trapping and aerial gunning. And you want to do that pretty intensively until you experience diminished success there. And then you can start looking at your tools of pressure and ultimately dogs, but also intermittently coming back in with your trapping and aerial gunning as necessary. This is kind of the model that these eradication studies have put forth, and have had a tremendous amount of success. But trapping is probably generally the most accessible tool that we have, right? For the average landowner, generally, because not everybody has a helicopter and a machine gun, right? So with trapping, some of the advantages are that this is a highly effective tool, particularly at capturing large groups or sounders of wild pigs. Wild pigs run around in groups called sounders. It's kind of like a herd of buffalo or a flock of geese. And when you see a group of more than 3 or 4 pigs, usually that's going to be a sounder. And when we're trapping, we want to target that entire sounder. Usually, there are exceptions. For example, boars, the larger males and the breeding class males, they are generally solitary, and that's the time that we can pull out some of our other tools. That's the time that we can pull out box traps. But when we talk about trapping generally, we're talking about removing large numbers of individuals at a time and trying to trap at a sounder level. And I'll get into that a little bit more too as we proceed. Another advantage of trapping is the transport and sale. of live wild pigs in the state of Texas. Movement and sale of wild pigs is regulated by the Texas Animal Health Commission, and currently there are approximately 114 different facilities in Texas that will purchase your live wild pigs. Now, price per pound ranges, I've seen it in the last 4 or 5 years, I've seen it as high as 75 cents per pound. I don't believe it's anywhere near that now, and it hasn't been for some time. Right now, we're looking at 25, 30 cents per pound, and you're certainly not going to get rich by doing this, but this is a good way to offset some of your damage costs. This is a good way to offset some of your bait costs and some of the costs that it would take to control these pigs through techniques such as trapping. Another thing about trapping is that this is a great baseline to combine with other methods. I had mentioned the eradication studies and how they enacted their efforts, and usually they start with trapping and aerial gunning, and we should be looking at it the same way. We should be looking at trapping as our baseline to where we can branch out from trapping and utilize other techniques and tools as necessary. Say, for example, when resource availability becomes higher, or we experience diminished success through our trapping and aerial gunning efforts. Disadvantages of trapping, I mean, let's be honest here. It can be time intensive. It can be time intensive, particularly when we're seeking to do it the correct way. And the correct way is to target these animals at the sounder level and to utilize traps that are large enough to contain the total number of individuals that we're after. And that's usually through the process of pre-baiting and conditioning, which is something that could take a few days, a few weeks, a month, or more. But to do it correctly, we do have to pattern these pigs. We do have to give them the time to become comfortable and routinely visiting our traps prior to enacting our single trap night. Executed correctly, removing an entire sounder of pigs involves only one night where we actually are setting our trap to catch. The rest of the time, we're pre-baiting and conditioning, and we're monitoring with whatever type of camera device or monitoring device you want to use. There's a variety of them out there. But when we trap, we generally want to target the entire sounder and remove as many as possible. Now, there's certainly exceptions to this. It can be difficult to do, and sometimes we have to do the best that we can, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Materials costs, the trap that you're looking at here in this slide is fairly inexpensive. You can go pretty inexpensive and be successful. You can also go very expensive and be successful as well. It's just a matter of what your needs are and what you're looking to do. But in some cases, materials costs, particularly for remote, suspended, and human activated systems, can get up there. The prices have gotten a lot better in the last couple of years, but they're still considerably higher than an animal activated system like we're looking at here. All right, another way to trap is box traps. And I want to take a few minutes to discuss box traps as a tool. That they're certainly a viable tool in wild pig management. But I'd like to tell a story of a very common situation that occurs all across Texas. And we'll tell the story of Joe Farmer and the box trap. And so, Joe Farmer, he's got a wild pig problem. He's noticed a bunch of damage in his fields. So what does he do? He goes to the local feed store, and what do they want to sell him? Usually they want to sell him a 4x8 box trap with some sort of rooter type gate system. So Joe feels pretty good about that, and he buys that system and he takes it out to his field, throws some corn in there and sets that trap to catch. Now, within maybe it's a couple of days, maybe it's the next night, but Joe is ultimately successful, and when he is successful, he catches 1 or 2 pigs. He feels pretty good about that, so he sets it to catch again. This time it takes a little longer, but he catches 1 or 2 pigs again. He keeps this up for 4, 5, 6 months, but sooner or later, what happens to Joe is all of a sudden the wild pigs will not go into that trap. He's got more wild pigs on his property than he's ever had before, only now they will not touch that box trap, and he can't figure out why he can't get a single pig to come into that trap. The reason being is this, or a few of the reasons for that could be trap aversion brought on by incomplete captures. What we mean by that is, let's talk about a sounder of wild pigs. Let's say there's 10 pigs in that sounder. Now, 10 pigs come up to the box trap. One or two of them get in there, and they even get trapped. But what happened? 8 pigs just witnessed their buddies get pulled into that box trap, and it doesn't take that happening too many times before we build up trap aversion in wild pig populations. And this has happened so many times across Texas that there are areas in Texas where it's very difficult to get a pig to get into a trap, period, no matter what you do, no matter what kind of trap it is. Essentially, when we're trapping, we need to do our best to try to leave no witnesses, because as we spoke of yesterday, wild pigs are so intelligent that they will build up that aversion through incomplete capture. And like I said before, and I'm sure many of you have experienced, it doesn't take too long before they won't go into a trap at all. Research conducted in Georgia found that larger corral-style traps are as much as 4 times more effective at removing an entire sounder of pigs, and thereby at reducing populations. Now, I want to point out, Texas A&M, myself included, I am not here to condemn box traps, okay? Box traps have a viable role in wild pig management, particularly for targeting solitary boars, smaller groups of pigs, and especially in urban and suburban areas where a lot of times you can't build a big old corral trap. You need that portability, and you do need to drive those pigs and cause them to abandon those areas. Box traps will do that. So it's all about picking the right tool for the job. And generally what we advocate, no matter what kind of trap you're using, it needs to be large enough to contain the total number of individuals that we're after. And that is the big take-home message. And so, like I said, we're not condemning box traps, and there's actually some really creative and fantastic things that we can do with box traps that make them more successful at removing wild pigs at the sounder level. What we're looking at here is an oversized modified box trap designed by a gentleman by the name of Leroy Moxagemba. This is a really awesome trap. You can see that there's a portion of the top removed for non-target species like deer and turkeys that can just hop out of there. Pigs can't because of the additional paneling there on the top. You're also seeing a fairly large entrance door, right? That can be helpful. That can be helpful, especially for particularly trap shy pigs that have been trapped at and have been a part of numerous incomplete captures. And they know pretty well that it's not a good idea to try to push through any kind of metal contraption. The same thing with the portion of the floor being removed. A lot of times trap shy pigs, when they're walking on metal grating, that can be a pretty big indicator that they're in a pretty dangerous spot. But this trap is modified to be more successful at the sounder level. It is larger, but the benefit of it is that it still retains the portability of box traps, meaning that you can flip this thing on its side, load it in the back of the truck. You don't have to drive a T-post, and you can move it all around the ranch. And so this is another way that we can use box trapping systems. And so not condemning box traps, but it's all about picking the right tool for the job and using a trap system that is large enough to contain the total number of pigs that we're after. And for most of us, that's going to mean some sort of corral trap, right? But something that's very important to point out is if we're using an animal activated corral trap like this, or if we're using a box trap like this, if we don't go through the pre-baiting process, meaning that if we just take that corn or that bait and throw it in here and set this thing to catch the very first night, you'll probably catch 1 or 2 pigs, but you can result, or that effort can result in the same amount of trap aversion, and it results in the same type of incomplete capture that we're talking about with box traps. And usually what we need to do in most cases is to pre-bait and condition those animals over time. We talked about that this is a process that could take a couple of days. I've had an entire sounder of pigs come in the very first night. I don't know why, but it certainly has happened. Sometimes it takes a week, sometimes it takes 3 weeks, sometimes after an entire month of pre-baiting and conditioning, say you have 20 pigs in a sounder, and you're only able to get 18 or 17 of those pigs into that trap routinely. Now, oftentimes that's the time to go ahead and set your trap to catch. That's the time to go ahead and have your single trap night. The reason being is that, you probably weren't going to get the rest of those pigs in there anyway, but also we want to check that trap first thing in the morning, because a lot of times what happens is those 2 or 3 pigs that you weren't able to get into that trap, even though you removed the 17, 18, they're going to be right outside of that trap first thing in the morning. They're going to be laying up against that trap. And it's a great time to combine other methods, including the Winchester, because many times you can remove the remaining individuals in that sounder. But it's up to you, right? And this is a fluid process. You have to identify what the pigs are doing on your property. You have to identify the level of comfort that the animals have, and it's up to you to decide when is the right time to have your trap night. Or in the case of a human activated system, when is the time to go ahead and drop that trap, or drop that gate rather. So just be aware that this is a process that you have to tweak over time, but also be aware that we're trying to get as many of them as we can, even if they have experienced a fair level of trap aversion through incomplete capture. The way that we monitor our pigs, the way that we know when it's time to have our trap night, I mean, this is not rocket science. We have to have some sort of camera or video capture device, and it does not have to be super expensive. A standard Bushnell or Moultrie or whatever that you can get from Walmart works just fine. It doesn't have to have 10,000 megapixels or anything. You just need to know how many pigs there are and when they're routinely visiting the trap site. Now, I like to run game cameras on video function. I feel like that in 30 seconds to 1 minute bursts, I feel like that gives me a lot better information about the animal behavior. Meaning that I get to know, as they approach that trap, are they comfortable? Are they freaked out? Is there anything about my trap setup that they don't like? Things that you really can identify when you're looking at this data through video, instead of just a still picture of a pig that you can't really tell what his or her temperament is. So that's just a suggestion to you guys, but we do need to use our game cameras in order to do that. They also have, and these are pretty cool, this is relatively new, cellular game cameras. And what these do is allow for the remote monitoring of wild pigs. And I know a lot of absentee landowners are really getting into these things. Any situation where it's going to be a week or two or a month before you can get back to the property, that doesn't mean that you have to stop trapping. In fact, you can live in Dallas and have a property in the hill country and be monitoring your pre-baited trap sites the entire time. So that way, when you go out to the property, you'll know when those pigs are ready to go and you can have your trap night. Cell service is required, right? So you're going to have to pay that monthly cell service fee. It does capture, they do capture both still images as well as video, and they are relatively expensive compared to a standard camera. But particularly for our absentee landowners that can't get out to the property every couple of weeks or so, this is a very viable option. And I've seen a lot of folks have a lot of success with this just in the short time that they've been out. Now, human activated systems, this just happens to be a boar buster trap. I'm not endorsing, Texas A&M does not endorse boar buster, but we do endorse human activated systems like boar busters, like wireless systems, like Tusk Innovations, like the variety of ones that are out there. But they all do the same thing, right? This is a human activated system where you monitor from a remote camera into your smartphone, into your computer, and you can be at the house trapping pigs on the property, at whatever time they're there. These are very successful tools. They're considerably more expensive than an animal activated system. However, you often get what you pay for. For example, the Noble Foundation boasts capture rates in excess of 80% with their human activated system. This is significant because of the research, right? You guys have probably heard the statistic that 66% of the wild pig population needs to be removed annually just to keep the same number of pigs on the landscape. So we said that we have 2 million pigs out on the landscape, so if we're removing 66%, there's still going to be 2 million pigs on the landscape. However, if you have a capture rate in excess of 66%, what that means is that you are in fact putting a dent in the population. You are reducing populations. And so this is one of the only trapping systems that boast the ability to reduce populations. But that said, executed correctly, animal activated systems can be just as successful. These just provide a little bit more ease of ability to do so. But with any type of corral trap, whether it's a human activated one, whether it's an animal activated one, we do have to have some sort of gate or funnel. In this case, we're looking at a trap that has two gates on it, which can be particularly successful along rivers and streams where the pigs are traveling up and down on both sides. It's also a good technique for trap shy pigs that don't like visual barriers and would be more likely to go in whenever they can see from one side to the other. But you're going to have some sort of panel, utility panels, or in many cases, folks are going to the hinge systems and the pin systems these days. But your mesh, no matter what kind of paneling you use, we recommend it be a 4-inch mesh or less, simply because the juveniles can squirt through if it's any larger than that. Many of the traps these days don't have T-posts, but if you'd like to use those, 4-foot T-post spacing is recommended. You can cheat on that a little bit depending on your soil type, but if you're in any kind of loose soil, you certainly need to adhere to that recommendation. And then 5-foot panel height, right? So I worked for Parks and Wildlife for a number of years. We trapped a lot of pigs with 4-foot panels and thought we were pretty good about it at that. Then I got to A&M and they're like, man, we need to have these 5-foot panels. And I wondered why. And the answer is, this is why. It's about 130-pound sow and a 4-foot panel. Right, so you guys notice, that pig did not climb. That pig straight jumped that 4-foot panel. So that's one of the reasons why we need a little bit more height on our panels. 5 foot is good, but since we started recommending 5-foot panels, I've had numerous folks come show me videos of pigs jumping 6-foot panels. And that's why today I'm going to recommend that you use 7-foot panels minimum. I'm completely kidding, guys. For the most part, 5-foot panels are just fine. They work very, very well. Some pigs can get over them. But that is why it's very important after we enact our single trap night to be there first thing in the morning. For one, we don't want to allow those pigs to be in the sun because they don't have sweat glands. They will expire fairly quickly in direct sunlight, and that's not humane. But two, we don't want to give them any chance to get out, and we want to go ahead and load up those pigs or eliminate them at that time. So be there first thing in the morning, and you can also have a chance at popping any residual pigs that might be hanging out near the trap site.
Josh, if you don't mind, can we go ahead and kind of put a pause on this at this point?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate that. I mean, great information there. We had some questions coming in that we will get to shortly. One that just came in on Josh's presentation there at the end about pigs digging out. And I wonder, Leah, we could talk about that real quick. If you want to throw up one of the first polling question, that might be a great time to do that.
Yes. So we're going to send 2 polling questions, but we'll just start with one for now. I'm going to give y'all 2 minutes to answer. And I'll give you a little 10-second warning before we close it and share the results.
So I think you guys can just click on that and it will record the results for this. Lucy asks if the pigs will dig out. And I think the big key to that is the area that you choose to set your trap up, and also your T-post spacing. But yeah, they're smart animals. We learned yesterday that pigs are second only to primates in intelligence, so they will find ways to get out of those traps. And so having your trap built solidly is very important. I think digging them into the ground can be a little labor intensive and may not be that fruitful anyway. But the quality of your equipment, how you set that trap up, is going to reduce that impact. And as Josh got to at the very end as well, you don't want those pigs in the trap very long either. Not just for humane reasons, but because the longer they're in there, the more they're going to beat up your trap, the more they're going to try to find a way to get out. So appreciate you guys clicking on this poll. I'm going to start sharing my screen just with some local program while we wrap that up. My internet is acting a little bit funny, but hopefully you guys can still hear me and see my screen.
Yes, you are. Okay, I'm going to give everybody a 10-second warning, and then we're going to close this poll. So if you haven't responded yet, please respond, and then we'll be closing it up.
Okay.
Okay, so everybody
All right.
now see the results. Do you see those, Nick?
I see them. That's about where we were yesterday. Had a couple of folks on here that have had some pretty significant damage. So I think this is a good segue to talk about some of the resources that we can help you with and that we can provide in addition to these webinars and our website. So this is not related to Hays County, but in Caldwell County, every year since 2012, we have implemented a bounty program. And so far this year, I just wanted to let y'all know in Caldwell, we've had over 2,000 hogs turned in 2020 for a $5 bounty. That was even with having a postponement from March to June. And due to COVID, we implemented a virtual bounty and had over 900 tails and hog receipts turned in within a couple of weeks through that program. So we are now expended in Caldwell County. We're going to see if we can get a little bit more funds locally, but our grant funds have been expended there. The virtual bounty had 6 folks that had been participating previously and 3 new people for the first time. The first time to participate in the bounty program was through the virtual bounty. This might be something that we want to try in Hays County. Historically, we have not had good results on a bounty program here. I think it has to do with demographics and a lot of absentee landowners, smaller land parcels and less agriculture. But it's something that we might try, especially through a virtual program where we do it. The problem then has to do with discarding of biological evidence. So we might have to change up how we do our proof of harvest. But other than that, I think it's a good option possibly for Hays County. We did conduct a little bit more aerial control this year, just 3 hours worth. There's not a lot of great lands for aerial control just due to the terrain in Hays County, but it is still a tool. And if you are interested in having aerial control conducted, please contact me, especially if you can get a pool of neighbors together. There are some areas that we could get into and try for winter of 2021. We still have a wireless trap that floats around Hays County that if you are interested in having that trap on your property.
Hey, Nick, you are cutting out pretty badly right now, so just wanted to give you a heads up. Hey, Nick, are you there?
What was that, Leah?
You cut out pretty badly during that last part, so if you could re-say what you were just saying.
Can you hear me? My screen seems to be locked up.
We can hear you now, but you cut out pretty badly there.
I'm sorry about that. I apologize. So, I think I was getting into wireless traps, and the wireless trap we have available is a floating trap, and you can sign up for that in the survey that we'll send you afterwards. I think now I'm all kerfuffled here. Stop my screen sharing. Let me bring that back up. And it is a 15-foot trap, and it is something that you can monitor remotely from your home or wherever you are at. It works with the cellular signal, but we cover that for Hays County residents. So if you're interested, it's a great tool to use. It's a large corral trap. We also have some grant funds for some trapping kits. In Hays County, we have 2 trapping kits to give away, and if you complete that survey that we send you at the end, you'll be eligible for those trapping kits. It's a little over $400 value and would include panels and posts to assemble your own corral trap. So that can be a really good tool for you. Folks that could use some more help, I highly recommend you sign up for those, and we can have you pick those up at King Feed, hopefully in August. Finally, we don't have future funding yet announced for 2021, but it has come every year through the legislature. So I expect that we will see a grant request soon. So those are the local updates. I want to really encourage the folks that live in the Upper San Marcos watershed, Cypress Creek watershed, Blanco River watershed, the Onion Creek. Hays County has so many terrific water resources, and the impacts from feral hogs on water quality are actually quite significant. So managing those hog populations is a great way to protect those resources that we love and value here in Hays County. We have Stephen Reisinger here on the call today with the Plum Creek Watershed Partnership. Plum Creek's headwaters are in Kyle, so eastern Hays County. We see a lot of impacts over there, in particular in eastern Hays County. Aspen Navarro is on. She's a watershed coordinator for the Upper San Marcos watershed, and I manage to work in Cypress Creek. So any of us can also help provide you with resources on managing your watershed, managing your feral hogs. Please reach out to these folks. And with that, I'd like to move on to questions and then save a little time at the end for Josh's cool tools that we're going to get a chance to look at. So,
we've got.
Let's see. We had. Go ahead, Leah.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat that is asking if there's a list of property owners who are open to allow hog trapping and hunting in the area. I know we get that question a lot, Nick. So what's your take on that?
That list is much, much shorter than the folks that want to hunt and trap. Most of the requests that we get are folks from out of state that want to come and go hunting. And I tend to kind of push those off. The best way to get access to hunting areas is to try to network with local landowners. And right now in the time of COVID, I know how difficult that can be. So that is tough. What I have put on our website is a list of, I think there's 3 or 4 guys on there or groups that that will provide some aerial, night vision, thermal hunting, some trapping services as well. These are folks that we have a relationship with that I feel like they're trustworthy and would do a good job for folks. But we don't sanction that specifically through the task force. It's really about landowners connecting with those people, or if you're a hunter or a trapper, you need to connect to that. Another question that's just coming in on helicopter cost. Helicopters, the aerial control is a fair amount cheaper than it used to be that we paid for. We used to pay around $700 an hour for a larger helicopter and 2 gunners. And for the last several years, we've contracted with Veracity Aviation out of Seguin. And it's somewhere in $450 to $500 per hour range, and they provide a shooter. If you want to shoot with them, if you want them to take you up in a helicopter, that's also a possibility. You have to go through a training course and then pay for the helicopter time. But somewhere around $500 an hour is what the helicopters are going to cost. Let's see. We had a question earlier I want to respond to, and I don't know if Josh has any insight on this, but folks looking at wildlife exemptions and needing to have activities related to those. I know, Josh, you were talking about, you were starting to talk on wildlife exemptions yesterday. I thought we could provide attendance list for this webinar, but I don't know, Josh, do you know what kind of requirements there are? Is it just county by county?
Yes, it is by county, and I think what we'll do today is we'll make that the focus of our resources, because we have a fantastic resource that'll put you in touch with everything you need to know to get your wildlife exemption.
Okay. And I think this one was on maintaining the wildlife exemption too. So we'll do whatever we can. If folks are out there trying to get this to count as an activity, I think this certainly would qualify if we have the right paperwork for Hays County. So just email us afterwards, and we can send out some type of attendance list or completion list. Let's see. Josh.
Yes, sir.
Public areas that allow for hunting or trapping. What is your thought on that? Is that just through the parks program, the hunting, public hunts?
Sure. So, very common question, in excess of 95% of Texas is privately owned, right? And the wildlife industry in the state of Texas is, in fact, big business. So we do have the WMA's, the Texas Parks and Wildlife State Park hunting program, but neither one of those allow trapping. So you can get onto some hunts and apply and enter the lotteries and that sort of thing. But by and large, for the most part, we're looking at a privately owned state where you have to secure private permissions or pay a fee in order to pursue wild pigs. And to the question earlier, a really good contact for whatever county that you might be interested in hog hunting is your Agriculture and Natural Resources County Extension Agent. This is the individual that knows most of the farmers in the area, that knows farmers and ranchers' problems with wild pigs, and may be able to put you in touch with somebody that's having a particular problem with wild pigs and might be more likely to let you onto that property without fee. But I would say it would start there with that county extension agent for whatever county you're pursuing. Secondly, to the helicopter thing, a lot of folks don't know that we have federal and state trappers in Texas Wildlife Services. These folks provide, in many cases, minimal cost or free aerial gunning operations. Again, you would get in touch with your county extension agent to see if you can get on those flight lists. And the other option is, since 2011, since the pork chopper bill passed, that allowed for private aerial gunning operations throughout the state. In many cases, if you're a landowner or a farmer looking to have aerial gunning operations on your property, you can contact a reputable private flyer, and many times they will do that for free. They will provide that service to you for free in exchange for access to your property. So I did want to point out those options there as well.
That's great, Josh. I tell you what, we've got about 5 minutes left, and I think it would be great if you could show off some of the resources, and maybe let's look at the wildlife exemption module that you have.
Absolutely. So let me figure out how to share my screen real quick.
And Josh, while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and share another poll question for everybody, kind of looking forward towards next year.
Okay.
So that should be open now. Folks, feel free to respond. We'll give you another 2 minutes, and I'll pop on with another 10-second warning before we take it down.
Okay.
Can Josh keep going while we're doing the poll?
Definitely.
Okay. Are you guys seeing the NRI website, or are y'all seeing the snaring deal right now?
We're seeing
the website right now, Josh.
Okay, perfect. I couldn't tell because the polls on. Never mind. It doesn't matter. All right, guys. Look, in response to this COVID-19 thing that pretty much took everybody by surprise, it changed a lot of things. Worldwide, but particularly when it comes to education. For some reason, you can figure it out yourselves. People no longer want to gather in large groups to get CEUs and listen to wildlife talks. Maybe it has something to do with a contagious virus. But A&M has had an awesome response across multiple facets, and that includes wildlife education. In a very short time, we've put together 22 full courses with 5 or 6 more in the works. And we're in the process of getting these certified for CEU credit. They span everything from reptiles and quail to, we have some great wild pig lessons as well. More wild pig stuff. I've done quite a few wild pig ones as well. These are fully interactive. They're embedded with resources and videos and even interactive quizzes and things. But I would encourage you guys to visit nri.tamu.edu/learning to access these fantastic courses, including how to find your natural resource professionals, things landowners need to know. You can learn how to construct wildlife ramps, mapping your own property. But one of the ones that we're particularly excited about, and we'll go ahead and get into this, this is the first of its kind. It does not exist anywhere else. I collaborated on that. Well, Dr. Jim Cathy created this course and collaborated with a number of NRI personnel. This is a comprehensive guide to getting wildlife management as an agricultural use for property tax valuation in Texas. This is a great one-stop shop for all the resources that you might need as far as getting your wildlife exemption and maintaining your wildlife exemption. And we'll jump into it here, and it's got multiple lessons in the course, and I'll try to take you to some things here that might be particularly important for folks who are trying to obtain or maintain. It provides a lot of the history there, the different forms and things that you'll need and can download here, some good knowledge checks and out if your land qualifies, or no matter where your land is. Find out the animals that you can manage. Just more about the definitions, because it can be a little bit confusing. I'm trying to find a particular list here. Oh, here's all of the counties. This is a very, very good resource here because it talks about the different ecoregions, and it also talks about what the different requirements are per ecoregion. And so if we can get to this next section here, I'll see if I can find that form. There within this Okay, yeah, it has the applications here. So it's, like I said, it's a one-stop shop. All the paperwork that you need, everything that you need to have your management plan in place, your applications, and what I'm really wanting to, different soil types. More on the wildlife management plan. Just bear with me. There's something in particular I'm looking for that is very, very helpful. Basically what I'm looking for, and it is in this lesson, is a comprehensive list of, this may be it right here. And these are, all of these resources are fully downloadable. You can access it on your phone or whatever. These are all of the guidelines here for practices. It's pretty extensive. You can get into it and really and learn a bunch, just information that you really can't find anywhere else. However, that is not what I was looking for. This is it right here. This is the practices by ecoregion, which whatever your property is, whatever county it's in, is within a certain ecoregion. And it talks about the wildlife management practice, how it needs to be regulated and how long it needs to be performed and for what duration, and the exact practices that you need to implement for your wildlife tax valuation. This does not exist anywhere else, and many people have been looking for something like this for a very long time. For example, let's say for example that you are going to do some imported red fire ant control, and you don't know how that works or how much land you need to do it. Well, in these ecoregions here, you got to have 10 acres or 10% of the infested area. You need to do that annually. And so right off the bat, you know what you need to do and in what time frame to maintain that wildlife valuation or wildlife exemption. And this goes across the board for all practices. And we put a lot of time into figuring all this stuff out for every ecoregion. And once folks realize that this exists, it's going to make getting a wildlife tax exemption a lot easier to get and a lot easier to maintain. And so we're very excited about this resource and all of our online courses, as a matter of fact. But this wildlife tax valuation one is particularly interesting because it's the first of its kind, and it's, like I said, it's a one-stop shop.
That is a tremendous resource, Josh, and we're a couple minutes over one at this point. So we provided the link here, nri.tmu.edu/learning. I really encourage you guys to go check those resources out. Also, be sure our website has a number of links as well. feralhogtaskforce.com. I'll be typing that in now.
And we will be sending out a follow-up email after this webinar to all participants and actually everyone that registered, kind of going over this information again. So if you don't get it right now, you'll get it in your inbox in about 30 minutes.
All right. Well, I really appreciate all the questions. Josh, thanks so much for joining us again today, and look forward to talking with you soon. You guys have a great rest of your afternoon, and hope you have a little bit few more tools in your belt for dealing with the hog situation. I did take note at the end on the poll. Looks like more trapping equipment was the winner in this poll for next year, so maybe we'll look at that for Hays County. And the $10 bounty, maybe that's what it's going to take to get the bounty going in Hays County. So we'll see. But thank you very much for your participation and your interest. And I hope we continue this conversation. Thanks, Leah, for managing all of this. And we'll talk to everyone soon. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks so much for having me, guys. Y'all have a great day.
You too. Thanks, everyone.